So my name is Rayan Jawad, and I'm one of the co-founders of Growth Studio. The premise of what we do is we work with emerging technologies and the corporates who need these emerging technologies as part of their innovation ambitions. We bring together the innovators, bring together the corporates, bring them together to create new value. Naturally, what we do is driven by trends and where the money is going and where we're seeing this emerging technology. So it's no surprise that this year at Unbound 2018, I have the privilege to talk about smart cities, where there's been a lot of movement. It's something I've been talking about for ages, but fortunately for all of you, we have a far more knowledgeable and eloquent panel of experts to be discussing a very specific part of smart cities, and that is this. The most pertinent issue that we're seeing, and people within the sector of smart cities are seeing, are the challenges of adoption. The technology exists, you innovators exist, the ambition exists, but why are we not living in that utopia? I won't be butchering anyone's introductions here. I'll let them do that themselves. So why don't we start off with Dan, and if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your involvement in smart cities, and see if you can weave in a definition of smart cities in there as well.
Thank you, Ryan. So I'm Dan Klein. Welcome, everybody. I am Chief Data Officer for Valtech, look after all the data we do globally. And I suspect none of you in the audience have ever heard of Valtech.
Is that true?
The only thing that you probably noticed is that we're sponsoring the lanyard. So, yeah, there's 3,000 of us around the world. We are in 16 countries. And fundamentally, what do? We create, design, and build stuff in the digital space. Right, I have a second hat here, which is quite important. I'm also an investor in a startup in Manchester called Steamico, and Steamico are putting in smart meters into rural Africa to electrify villages for the first time. The thing that's interesting there, and I'll come back to it, is that it allows, you're putting in a utility, so people understand that they're getting electricity for the first time, but of course this is now smart meters able to backhaul all the stuff that's going on in the home. So it's interesting. In terms of why am I here? We do a lot with cities in general, whether it's working for the companies like Rolex and Louis Vuitton on one hand, BMW and Audi, but then also through to governments like the British government, like local councils. And the challenge for us is we like to be quite provocative with our customers. We like to say to them, you need to get your stuff together here so that we actually start to create smart cities. And stop talking about it and let's just do it, okay? So I think, that's my 30,000 feet, and I'll just leave it at that, and we'll crack on.
We'll talk about just doing smart cities. Irene, tell us about yourself and weave in a definition of smart cities.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name's Irene Mcleese. I'm co-founder of See.Sense. We are a cycling technology and data company. We're an SME. We kind of have a double-sided IoT model, really. We have consumer products, which are purchased by our customers, which are cyclists. Yep. But off the back of those products, we help cyclists with the data that we're collecting through use cases which are really valuable to cyclists, but also through the value of that data to cities. So we've worked on a couple of large-scale citywide projects now across both Dublin and Manchester, and we've had some really fascinating results. To us, the idea of a smart city, I think it's an evolutionary thing. I think it's about cities evolving to make better use of their resources and build sustainability. But I guess beyond that, if you were to go to anyone on the street and say, what is a smart city? I don't think most people out there would really know. And I think what's really important is we think of it in terms of better cities. How do I move around the city? How do I experience the city? These are things that people want solved and want to be done, and it almost needs to just happen without people really needing to know the tech behind how that works. So I think people at the heart of smart cities is really important, alongside the technology enabler.
We'll talk about your technology more in a moment.
Sure.
John, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. So my name's John Davies from BT, where I'm a chief researcher with responsibility for Internet of Things. I lead a number of smart city projects at BT, including leading the BT contribution to the CityVerve Smart City project, which is some of you may have heard of, a very large smart city project up in Manchester, and a number of other smaller projects as well. So Ray was asking, what is a smart city?
Yeah.
I guess the sort of traditional definition would be, it's the use of technology to make a city more efficient and more effective for the citizens and the businesses that are in that city. So that's a technical kind of definition. And then sometimes people say to me, the technology's the easy bit. And that's sort of right, but it's not quite right. Because as a technologist, I want to say that actually technology isn't always that easy. It's quite a hard bit, but it's not the only bit. Because smart cities, I think, are socio-technical, and you need to engage citizens and users from day one, rather than just put in a bunch of technology and hope that works. So a smart city is a socio-technical beast, where we have to combine really cool technology with the social aspects involving the citizens and the businesses of that city.
Great. Perfect lead into Paul.
Isn't the technology some internet and sensors and the easy stuff?
It's not easy. It's not as easy as you think. If it was easy, we'd all do it. We'd all be doing it, wouldn't we? But it's leading edge stuff, man.
So I'm probably a bit on the other side. I totally agree with your definition. I help people make smart cities and open innovation happen. I think for me, it's much more about working with the objectives behind a smart city and open innovation. It's making sure that all stakeholders are involved, are getting equal value. It's working with policymakers, government, private sector, public sector. It's creating co-creation initiatives. It's working with startups, and ultimately it's working for the people who live in the city, people who are going to adopt it, because without them, then it's kind of meaningless.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, welcome. Full disclosure, Paul is also my partner in Klein at Growth Studio, heads up open innovation. So we'll be picking your brains on how to actually collaborate between innovators and corporates. Thank you so much for introductions, and welcome to a session which I've called Sense in the City, which I think is quite clever. Let's start with exactly that, about the city. What does a city need to look like or be to be smart? I mean, IoT is everywhere, arguably everywhere. But when is an IoT solution a smart city solution? John, should we start with you?
So, yeah, IoT is probably the key underpinning technology to deliver a smart city, because ultimately IoT gives you the data about what's happening in the city live and in real time, which can then be analyzed to give you the insights that you need to make the city more efficient and effective. But a smart city, it needs much more than that. It needs to be really aligned with the goals of the citizens and the businesses within the city. And it really needs to be also aligned with the strategic choices or the strategic direction of the local authority and the other policymakers in the city. So I'd say a key thing is to ensure that your smart city technology initiatives are well aligned at that strategic level, and to make sure you've got the engagement of both the city authorities and the businesses and the citizens of the city.
See, that's really interesting. When we talk about alignment, and maybe, Dad, I can come to you on this one. When we talk about alignment, to improve something, we need to be able to evaluate it. How on earth do you evaluate the performance of something as complex as a city before we can start to say, well, this solution can improve it? What are the KPIs of a city?
KPIs of a city? That's a huge challenge.
Huge challenge.
Huge. The critical thing when you start to think about measuring a city is, and in fact it's to John's point around the real-time nature of how you think about a city. If you have access to, and I'm going to sort of segue slightly and be slightly controversial here, it's not just the IoT that matters. It's the existing legacy systems that don't generate data in real time. Okay?
Yeah.
So we need to be looking at how those existing legacy systems, be it in local councils or elsewhere with private sector organizations, generate and expose real-time data. And at that point, you can start to look at behavioral cohorts of people that exist within cities and then work out how to nudge their behavior. I'm sounding like Rory Sutherland now for a moment. But you need to be able to look at the cohorts of people and how they exist and live, and then work out how you're going to improve that. And my view, for what it's worth, is IoT alone is not the answer. The answer is we need to think about our existing infrastructures and how that plays into answering the exam question, which is, how do I measure behavioral behaviors within a city so that I can improve it?
So I think we've touched this a number of times. We're touching on the actual segments of society being citizen-centric. Irene, as an innovator and a creator of a smart city solution, what is the difference between IoT and a smart city solution?
I think it's one where a true smart city solution actually crosses silos that exist in a city.
Yes.
So, taking, for example, our solution where we're looking at the data and insights that can come from cycling, in one sense, you could look at how that has impacts for cycling infrastructure, but actually there's a lot of impacts for health as well if you're able to get more people cycling. So what happens, I think, for a true smart city solution is that bird's eye view, that ability to take the leadership to look across all of those different silos and see how you can create solutions that are truly smart, operating on a number of different levels.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Technology in transport will have an impact on environment will have an impact on health. But Paul, that's not how our public services work, or those people who we need to influence, whose influence we need to implement solutions. That's not how they work.
It's really difficult, because I think an effective, measurable impact that you get from a smart city, it's all about breaking down those silos. And the challenge, and Irene, hopefully you'll talk about See.Sense and what they do in a bit more detail, but your technology behind the bike light can impact public health, congestion, air quality, potholes, a number of things. Straight away, you're looking at a transport authority, you're looking at the NHS, you're looking at city councils. There's lots of different departments. They're all silo thinking. Within those, you've got multiple silos as well. So the adoption of your technology to make a measurable impact is really, really challenging. There's no easy solution for it, and I suppose to touch on the challenge and go back to your original question, from my perspective, it's really difficult to measure the impact of a smart city. What you do have to do is measure silos, which conversely is what smart city is all about, breaking down. So if you're looking at air quality, there might be lots of different partners and lots of different innovators and measurable impact against air quality. But in order to make that happen, you have to break through silos, if that makes sense.
Can I pick up on this in air quality? Let me try and give you a real example. We obviously, everybody here knows about the diesel emission scandal from 2 or 3 years ago.
Of course.
Okay? Why did that come about? That came about because there's something called an end-of-line test in the car manufacturers. And frankly, it is not fit for purpose. It was designed in the 1960s. It's a complete waste of time, as we have seen. Now, the thing that's going on in the car makers at the moment is they are making available over the air on 3G dongles the emissions data out the back of the exhaust of every vehicle. So why aren't we having the conversation with governments around the world that the end-of-line test needs to be replaced with something that in real time matches every car's emissions against pollution sensors in a city, and we actually start to say, what are the contributions of each of the manufacturers to how they contribute to the pollution that we all then breathe in? And then, again, to your point, then let's start talking about how we bring NHS data into that. So how do we enable the effect on health for particulate emission and all that good stuff? This is a multifaceted thing with multiple data sources across multiple organizations. And we cannot just ask one organization to come up with some bright idea that's going to generate probably half a dozen data points that, frankly, you're not going to create value out of. This is a much bigger problem than that.
This is a perfect segue into actually working with public service, local authorities, governments. The recognition is clearly there. I mean, there's money being pumped into projects, and there's work being done. How effective, we'll talk about later, but there's work being done to try and build these solutions. John, whose responsibility is it to do exactly what Dan's saying, to actually lobby to drive change in local authorities, drive change at government level? I mean, we have a room full of problem solvers here, and innovators. Is it their responsibility?
That's a great question. Whose responsibility is it to drive change in a smart city? Is that the...
Let's go with that.
Okay, so clearly, I'd come back to my earlier point, really, that you need a city authority with vision, with the right strategy, with the right digital policies. But, what we've found is working with local authorities, city governments, they're not innovators. Clearly that's not what their job is. They're about delivering services to citizens. And often, they don't have the IT background or the capability to do that kind of innovation. So I think what you need, and something that what we tried to promote in CityVerve, the Manchester project, was really quite a rich ecosystem of people to provide the necessary innovation to deliver the smart city apps. So what I mean by that is we had a lot of different data providers, data being the oil of a smart city, right? Some of that data is free. A lot of it is free from government and from local government. Some of it might not be free from private providers. And then you need to get all that data onto a platform, and this comes back to the cross-silo point, where you can make data, whether it's air quality, environment, traffic, health, it's all on a single platform, so it's easily available. And what that does is that drives innovation, because that makes the innovators with the ideas for these cool smart city applications can then come along and pick up the data they need from one single platform, rather than having to go here and there and get data in different formats. So that kind of ecosystem approach and having the data in one place available in a more uniform way will help to foster innovation and drive the kind of stuff that you're talking about.
Could I add on to that? And I've got to be quite careful. I've been told not to be mean about the civil service, but I think one of the major challenges that we have, not only in the UK but across a lot of the regions we work in, is that the innovation and the creative thinking are left to the likes of Irene or to the Johns to find creative technical solutions. But actually, you've got to be creative and innovation in every single facet of a smart city. Right. It's about working with local councils to understand how you can think differently about their budgets, their objectives, to get around the unions, to make sure that there's public adoption. I think the challenge is that creative thinking is left to thinkers and doers who are not really part of the solution. And if you talk to any city council, any transport authority, they're very silo organizations, they're very traditional thinkers, and it's very difficult for them to incorporate a new way of thinking. So you need to work within their restrictions and really be creative about how you let them work outside of that.
So let me see if I can summarize this a little bit. And I think we'll give a bit of context on CityVerve as well. But Dan, to your point, that we need to be lobbying to the top level. I'll come to you in a moment, right? We need to be lobbying at the top level. John, to your point, and we'll talk about the BT platform as well, because it's a very elegant solution for a city, the BT Hypercap platform, to say, well, everyone collate your data into this platform, and we're going to release this data in a sensible way to innovators to be able to create solutions off the top of. Now, that also comes with its challenges, which you touched on, which, and I think if I summarize what you're saying, is that the onus of showing value is not on the public sector organization, the local authorities, it's on the innovators. It's just a shit way of the world and the world that we're in, because maybe that's the only way to drive change. Irene, as an innovator who's managed to work in this environment, is that true?
I would say initially, yes. There is an onus on the innovator to be able to show that what you're doing has an ROI, has a benefit for a different way of doing something. Why go through the pain of making the shift to change behaviors, change a way of working, et cetera, unless you've really, I guess, got a really compelling value proposition about what you're going to be able to deliver. But I would kind of caveat that by saying that, there is an onus on the SME to be able to articulate that value proposition and to be able to provide evidence for that where you can. But what we've been able to do in Manchester and in Dublin, actually, is to kind of test and learn a bit with cities as we develop that value proposition. Right. Because sometimes all of that stuff is not known, and it's really hard as an outside SME to guess what are the real challenges that the city's trying to solve. You need to open up and let us know that so we can build the right solution. Otherwise, we're guessing and we're throwing stuff over the fence and it may not land in the right place. And so
really
work
quickly,
with us.
How did you open those doors, though? Like those, you need to be able to communicate with the right people within these organisations.
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the real benefits that we had in coming in and participating in the Open Innovation Program through Manchester was to have our data become visible in the BT Hub. There's something really tangible about the city being able to see and visualize the data, because before that we were talking about what was possible, but when they could actually see our data in the streets of Manchester and look at that and see how it impacts, it completely changed the discussion. It really engaged the stakeholders and got them to see the art of the possible, and I think that helps for them to lobby and to bring the stakeholders on board that get support.
Visualising the value in a sense.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
okay, if I may, so absolutely, for innovation to happen, and you are articulating this by saying is something needs to enable it so you can innovate. There are two ways of getting data in this space. You either have user-generated data from the likes of torches on bicycles, or you get data from the public sector. The thing I think that frustrates us, the government has in the last 7 or 8 years shown an amazing willingness with the government digital service to do it right for digital. Mm-hmm. They need to step and repeat that in the data space. And they need to put some money behind it. The local councils, frankly, don't have any money to actually open up their data sets to do smart cities. So I'm not really into centralising data. I'm into organisationally, how do we fix the United Kingdom PLC with the Cabinet Office, with the Treasury, money where mouth is. Let's go and step and repeat the excellent work they did with the Government Digital Service and do a government data service equivalent and actually start to open up. And at the moment, what we have in the UK is Tim Berners-Lee is a lone voice. And he needs not to be a lone voice. So my ask of everybody in this room is the onus is back on you to help Tim Berners-Lee and others go and bang down the door of the Treasury, go and bang down the door of the Cabinet Office. Why is there not some central function that looks a bit like GDS, but is done for data? Because frankly, that is the only way the UK is going to sort this problem out with smart cities.
I like it. Start a revolution. But
Tweet hard.
tweet, yes, strongly worded tweet. No, but I think the point is there is that we actually this is something that needs to be changed at the top level. But John, at the same time, there needs to be an openness that doesn't currently exist in our business culture to share data. Why is that? And as someone who owns this platform, the onus is on you to try and get businesses to open up this data. How are you tackling this?
Yeah. So as you say, the ecosystem won't fly, obviously, unless there's a rich set of data shared. And quite often what you can do is you can incentivize businesses to share data by giving them benefit back. So they put their data on the platform, but maybe they get other data from the platform as well, which benefits their own applications and services. So if you think about the See.Sense bike light, for example, if Manchester City Council, for example, bought 500 of their bike lights, so they've paid for that data effectively to be generated now from the bike light. The cyclists get a benefit because they get a better bike light, but the people who paid for it, the City Council get a benefit as well because they get a very rich set of data, and we're looking at this in Manchester. They're getting a very rich set of data about how cyclists are using the cycling infrastructure around the city. So it's a matter of incentivising people, I think, and that there are real benefits to sharing data, or there can be. So that would be one point I would make. And to the point about not centralising data, the BT platform doesn't necessarily have to centralise data. It doesn't necessarily move data from one place to another and replicate it, but it does offer a uniform API, a uniform interface onto data wherever it may be stored. So I think that's a slightly different thing to just getting it all into one big silo. That's not necessarily what I'm advocating.
Makes sense. So, Paul, I mean, and Irene, actually everyone, there's often a situation where it's a bit chicken and egg, right? I'll give you my data if you show me value, but you can't show me value unless I give you my data. As somebody who collaborates between corporations, local authorities, and the innovators, how are you breaking this silo?
I think for me, it's a clear value exchange. I think the minute you start to talk to people who work in grey offices who aren't particularly innovative, and you start talking about smart cities, it feels very alien and very intangible. The minute you start talking about solving their problems through using data or something visual, something tangible, as Irene I think might go on to talk about in a second, that makes it a lot easier. You're not taking them outside their comfort zone. You're bringing people together to solve actual problems. The smart city is a facilitator. It's a vehicle to do that. So I think it's talking their language and being able to show them and demonstrate what you can show them. And I think Irene was, and See.Sense, in a great position because you have that data available. And if you talk about sort of some of the experiences you've had.
So in terms of sharing data and how we go about...
You need to have a relationship, and you have a relationship with local authorities that involves data sharing. On that basis alone, you've done something that most people struggle with massively. So how did you build that relationship with local authorities?
I guess initially, it's kind of a two-way thing because you need to, part of it came through raising our profile and I guess the city having enough trust in us as an SME that they're willing to test and learn with us. You know,
Right.
you're any SME coming up and knocking on the door of the city, who are you? There's so many SMEs, how do they know who they're going to spend their time with? We did a lot of work, I suppose, getting some of those validations and credibility sort of builders. One of them was winning the BT Infinity Lab competition, which was a global competition for connected cities. That gave us a great endorsement. In fact, it was that partnership with BT which actually unlocked the door and enabled us to start having conversations at that level in Manchester. And I think that credibility really helped. But then it was about following through on that and delivering what we had talked about, and then I guess having the opportunity to expose that data. It's about being open to participating in these open innovation platforms.
Like CityVerve in Manchester.
Like CityVerve in Manchester, where we work with the Growth Studio. And I think the real value that we experienced out of that was learning how to articulate our value proposition clearly. We're cyclists, we're technology background. It was a new thing for us to start interfacing with cities and understanding stakeholders and how all of this works. And actually, that program was incredibly useful for us to help us navigate some of those conversations, to help us see the different layers, and I guess think about strategically how we can position ourselves to come through that and go from doing pilots into having a commercial, viable, sustainable project with cities that we build. So I think having that support mechanism around you from the partnerships that you build with larger corporates who can give you some of that support and coaching is really incredibly important, plus reaching out to those innovation networks. And I guess learning from other SMEs as well. Through the Open Innovation Program, we made some great connections there, and you know, it sparked ideas of potential collaborations that we can do in future as well. I think smart cities is the growth, the opportunity in smart cities is about collaboration. Nobody has a solution, the one thing that's going to solve every problem for a city, and it's those people that can work together, collaborate, build something really powerful is other people and are going to do the most for their cities.
And I think if you don't, I think you make a very interesting point. I'm just going to elaborate on it, which is the whole test and learn idea. So we have to test and learn. This is an unknown space. We typically have organisations, particularly the private sector, who are very risk averse on test and learn as a cultural idea. And the government has made, the UK government has made some inroads in that with GDS, as I mentioned before. But testing and learning and understanding that probably 50% of your stuff is going to be a load of crap, and you're just going to have to bin it.
Level of acceptance.
Yeah, it's what it is. You know, you're going to do stuff that goes wrong. There's a cultural shift also with the way the private sector engages, particularly the big corporates. The startups have much more of test and learn, obviously, in the nature of what they do. But getting that culture into how we think about data and how we think about smart cities and landing it so that there will be the successes, there will be the stuff that's really amazing. There's also going to be a load of rubbish that we don't want to ever talk about ever again. That's fine. That's normal. But actually, that's what we need to be promoting in how we think about smart cities.
So, but we're seeing this theme, right? Throughout this entire session so far about collaboration. But Paul, easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, you're working with people that are inherently uncollaborative. There is a culture of silo within the public sectors. You've got private organisations that have a massive fear of sharing data, and sometimes rightly so, sometimes unrightly so. Yeah, I wouldn't share the data from my business with anyone unless there's a clear value exchange, and it's really difficult for anyone to come.
Is that value monetary? Sorry to interrupt. Is that value monetary?
I'd say usually it would be given the type of company I work with, but it might not necessarily be. So I suppose the challenge is coming up with a shared objective that everyone can work to. And so air quality, it's been mandated at policy level that cities now have mandates to create cleaner air. That's a lot easier for people to get behind and to work towards. But in order for that to happen, you've got to have the infrastructure that John will provide. You've got to be able for transport authorities, for the NHS, for local governments to all work towards that shared set of objectives, that they've got budget available to do so, that they've got clear KPIs and metrics that they're working to, that there is an area where they can openly collaborate, and it's okay to collaborate. They've got to have specific resource set aside. And that's incredibly disruptive to quite a traditional organization. I swore I wouldn't use the word disruptive, I do apologize. But it's very, very difficult. But I think in order to have a shared goal, with something like air quality, with health, with something to collate behind, as opposed to this nebulous smart city concept, it makes it a lot easier for uncollaborative people to collaborate.
So, John, let's go to you on this one. I'm going to hit you with a double whammy question, right?
Yep.
Take it in two parts or answer them at the same time if you want to. Collaboration between silos is really what we're talking about.
Yep.
How do you propose that we can have an NHS Foundation Trust working closely on a project with the Department for Transport and also the Energy and Environment of it? This is not how they work. And the second part of that question is, Paul mentioned air quality monitoring. I mean, are we really talking about a city full of sensors? Who's going to power this? Like, who's going to pay for this? Is more data, John, is more data really the problem here?
Okay, there's loads of things there.
Yeah, there's loads. But I'm also looking at the timing.
So part of it goes back to Paul's point about, you've got to really make concrete, really crystallize what you're trying to do and what the benefits of the specific apps might be. And to his point about, air quality being now policy that you have to hit certain targets on air quality, that will certainly motivate people. And part of the solution here is undoubtedly political. So don't want to bang on about Manchester too much, but I have spent quite a lot of time there in the last couple of years on this project. And, there's the Devo Max thing in Manchester. And the great thing about that is that the Greater Manchester Combined Authority have their hands on all the levers in a way that's actually quite unusual in this country. So they've got health, they've got social care, they've got transport, they've got the whole lot. And so, all of a sudden, you've got a mayor and a combined authority that is actually looking after all the silos. And I think that as a political model will help to drive, all the other things that we want to see at the lower levels about data silos and so forth. Then you've got a point about data and value and why would we release it. And I think there's an interesting open question, frankly, at the moment about data monetization. Mm-hmm. So if we have this, this ecosystem where some people are providing data and some people are analyzing it or building apps using it, is there a model whereby the data providers can get their data monetized, perhaps through the platform, through some kind of trusted broker or whatever, and actually get paid by the app developers for the use of their data? Obviously, the app developers that get paid in turn. So it's quite a complex and multi-sided business model. I think that's an open question as to whether that one's going to fly or not. And
I've got to say, I don't think middlemen are the way but forward. But anyway, we need to get rid of middlemen completely.
Let me just finish off. To your point about costs, that's right, going right back to that, which was we certainly need investment, as I think you were saying. Smart cities, they have this great potential in theory to allow you to do more with less. So, instead of having to build a new road with massive capital infrastructure investment, if you can make the current roads more efficient and get more use out of them, maybe you won't have to build that big road. But there's a bit of a paradox because local authorities in this age of austerity, as we all know, haven't got that money to invest, even not invest in the big road, but even to invest perhaps in the smart city stuff. So we do need to see some level of investment from government in order to save potentially more investment further down the line on capital infrastructure.
But it gets incredibly complicated. So air quality, and I'll stop talking about air quality shortly, but one of the mandates in London, as an example, is to improve air quality. The greatest beneficiaries of that is going to be the NHS, ultimately. The people who are going to fix that are going to be people from TfL, who are going to stop carbon spewing buses and cars. It's going to be the innovators like Irene that are getting people out of cars and onto bikes. In order for that to really happen, you've got to make it safer. So then that's the road people, whoever they might be. So you get to really tricky quagmire of budget distribution. And I suppose in order to make that happen, you've got to have clear objectives, clear budget set aside, and also that openness of data so you can measure the impact. So it starts at policy level.
But I think what I've heard from everyone at this stage, I'm going to try and summarize this, is that the directive or the commitment needs to be from people who are above the silos, the higher levels in the organisation. John, you mentioned the Manchester project, CityVerb, which was a 2-year project to basically sandbox Manchester with smart city solutions to almost create that blueprint to be rolled out elsewhere. That commitment came from the very top level, and maybe that's why it worked so well. Is that?
But there's the other thing is there's also bottom-up examples that need to be celebrated.
Right.
So as an example, DVSA make MOT history available, right? On the surface it's trivial, but there's a quid pro quo with the market that sells second-hand cars.
Right.
That quid pro quo is people like Auto Trader, who see 85% of the market of all cars, they don't want cut and shuts in their trading ecosystem.
Yeah.
DVSA, on the other hand, want cut and shuts taken off the road. So guess what? They share data. They don't have any middlemen. It's about sharing data to get rid of cut and shuts. No money's changing hands. They both get value out of it. From a policy perspective with DVSA and from user experience with Auto Trader and the like. So, there's lots of examples out there that we need to be celebrating, taking forward to government and going, right, now sort your stuff out at the top and let's start doing this properly.
Right. I'm just really conscious of time because I want to try and open up the audience one or two questions. So, let's start with Irene. Irene, absolutely follow on from the conversation, but also give our audience of incredibly talented innovators some form of practical takeaway to make some good headway in the space of creating a smart city solution. Tie that in together.
So I was thinking really that there is a political will that we talked about needed to make decisions, but also internally it's about joining up the innovation programs with the people within the cities that are making decisions on a day-to-day basis. So I think there's actually a piece about building intelligence and capability internally within cities to handle data and to start to make evidence-based decisions it's about taking action really from the data and the insights and using it so it's not just sitting on the shelf, but things are changing from that. It's going to be really incredibly important.
To generate value from the data.
To generate value from the data, and then to be able to make uncomfortable, sometimes, decisions from that. So maybe it's not politically popular to put bike lanes in a certain section of the city. Maybe some car drivers are going to think they're going to be inconvenienced, but it takes the political will built off the evidence of those decisions to show that actually we are going to have so many more benefits for the city by doing this, and to have the confidence to follow through on what's been learned and the actionable insights that come through the Smart Cities Foundations to use that. So I think that's, for us, is looking as well as an SME, there are so many different ways that the data can be used.
Right.
So looking at initial use cases and value propositions that we've started to shape out of these projects, I sort of think at night time there's actually so many more ways that this can go, and we're still learning about all the different use cases and possibilities.
So understand the problem you're solving, create a value proposition, then define the data that you need and will create.
Yeah, but recognizing that there could be multiple value propositions and perhaps tentacles that reach further than you can even imagine yourself. So you must talk with your customers and stakeholders, understand their needs. You're making sure you're building stuff that helps them.
On that, sorry to rush you, Paul. Those tentacles, right? Is open innovation, and Dan mentioned this, is open innovation maybe the way forward here, where we say, here is a data, create something?
I think it's got to be baked in people's real life problems, and sadly in this world, it's got to be baked in where budget is. I think use open innovation, use that open data to start the conversation, to be able to go, this is your problem, this is how we solve it, this is what the opportunity could be. And I think, again, going back to the force that is See.Sense, you can solve 20 people's problems with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So you need to be really creative about going to the right people with that shared value exchange and going, this is what we're doing, John's platform is facilitating that. But it needs to be based, for the moment, for the next few years, on what people's objectives are, what's keeping them up at weight, where their budget sits. And for me, that's the only way, sadly, in the shorter term, to unlock it.
Great. Dan, give our audience some actual practical, a practical tip for what they can do to progress their journey in the space of smart city solutions. And we'll come on to
Well, I'm going to sound like a scratch record.
No.
Go and innovate, yes, but actually go and knock the door down on the Cabinet Office and the Treasury.
How?
Right now, you've got to go and look at where there are government departments that have data available. Go and look at it. Go and then mash that with some of the data you get out of private sector companies and think about how you put that and UGC together. I mean, yes, it's there, but actually we need to create a movement to actually solve this for the UK, otherwise smart cities just becomes theoretical.
This could be where it started. John, something for our innovators to take away.
Get involved. Come and look at the BT Manchester platform. We've got 500 data feeds. Anyone in this room can register on the portal. It's just waiting for you. Come and do some cool stuff. Other platforms are available, non-BT ones even. But there is a wealth of data out there. And I think, we're really interested in seeing what, in a bottom-up way, taking the Paul's point about it needs to be, also directed, but a bottom-up kind of approach where we see what the real innovators can do if we try and lower the barriers for people to get access to the data, and that's really what we're about.
So use a platform, create value, demonstrate that value, and that will open doors in the right places.
That's a See.Sense model right there, and they've been very
can I have
successful.
one thing, actually?
If Naomi and Ali don't kill me, I'll give you 10 seconds.
10 seconds. I just want to say, don't leave people out of smart cities.
Right.
A lot of people think smart cities is about installing cameras, monitoring people, top down. Get citizens involved, help them shape, help them tell you what they want to see solved. Get people engaged with the process.
Right. Thank you so much. I don't think, and I'm looking at Camille here, I don't think we have time for questions, do we? No. Okay, let's have one question, and the lady who's just behind Camille. We can't hear you, so presumably.
Hello? Oh,
Hi.
Okay, hi.
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. It was really, really interesting. I am a bit mixed with this whole thing because I think the problem with having open data or the fact of involving that with improving cities overall is, the last big news story when it comes to data are things like Facebook and how people were manipulated to start voting certain ways, okay? So I would say in a population scale, a lot of people are going to be like, I don't really want to share my data with these companies or have them use it because I'm basically getting manipulated. I'm very big on the idea that if I am happy to give whoever my data, but how are you, I don't know, or other companies going to do that in an ethical and psychologically good way? Yeah. And when it comes to cities, for example, I know how often people walk down a street or something. I don't want to suddenly see loads of, they're there anyway, but loads of adverts suddenly being telling me about what my Facebook feed was telling me 2 days ago. So what do you feel, how we can progress in that way?
Let's acknowledge this, that there is a lack of trust. John, how would you?
Yeah, great question. And we've seen, the Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica stuff, which has raised concerns. Although I have to say, not as much concern as you might hope. People seem to have just gone back to using Facebook now, and a lot of people don't care as long as it's free, and we need to educate people. That's part of the question. Facebook's price actually plummeted, in the 2 or 3 days after. If you look at it now, it's just eased on up back to normal, and everything's just carrying on. But to the point about, smart cities and the approach for smart cities, I think you do have to be really cognizant about people's personal data. And if I can illustrate with an example, the trial that we did with See.Sense, we gave out lights to 200 people in Greater Manchester, and we told them this light will track your position as you cycle around the city, and that will be really valuable to us. But we also allowed them, or didn't even allow them, encouraged them strongly to set what we call privacy zones, so that although the bike light is anonymized, so in other words, you don't know you know, Paul's bike light, which one it is, or you don't know which bike light mine is. Nevertheless, you have to be really careful with personal data, because if I'm making the same journey every day to say I'm going home in the evening to 31 Acacia Avenue, then, you know, you might start to think, right, light 71, that guy lives at 31 Acacia Avenue. And let's go to the electoral register and find out who lives there. And straight away, you know, you've got a personal data problem. So you have to think these things through quite carefully. Sometimes data which you might not think is sensitive turns out to be sensitive. That's really the point I'm making. And so what we did on the CityVerve See.Sense trial was we set privacy zones such that the first n minutes and the last n minutes of each journey would not actually be recorded. So you don't know actually exactly where a journey started or finished. You know where most of that journey was, you know the route, you know the speed, you know all that good stuff you can use for your analytics. But you make sure that no one can work out what those specific actual journeys are and therefore identify the individuals involved. So yeah, that's just one example where, you know, it's a good example, I think, where it does need quite a lot of thought.
Aggregated as well, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
it wasn't individual journeys. You need to have, you know, a quorum of journeys.
Yeah.
I think as well being really open and transparent about what we were trying to do. So people participated in the trial in the knowledge that their data would be shared. It was very transparent.
Right.
And most of our customers that we talk to actually understand that if they're going to, there's got to be a what's in it for me for sharing the data. There's got to be a reason why they would want to do it. Mostly they're really motivated to make sure that cities repair potholes and make things better for cyclists. Great. Also, they can get individual benefits back through the data as well and things through the app. But I think it's about definitely trust being at the heart of that and making sure that you respect that by being really transparent about why you're collecting the data, how it's going to be used, and making sure that you fundamentally respect that relationship.
It feels like it's about compromising what data you can collect and use in order to create a fair and equitable value exchange for the consumer that they're happy to participate in. And on that note, thank you so much to our esteemed panelists of...